Hi, I'm Yaakov Katz, Senior Fellow at the Jewish People Policy Institute, JPPI, here in Jerusalem, and welcome to another episode of our Inside Analysis and Look at Israel's war against Hamas. Today, I'm joined by two of my colleagues from JPPI, former Ambassador and Ministry of Foreign Affairs Director General Avi Gil, as well as Shmuel Rosner, another Senior Fellow at JPPI, journalist, analyst, and pollster, many other hats that Shmuel wears. But before we meet with the panel, we're joined live by Sima Shine, who is the former head of the Research and Intelligence Division of the Mossad, is a fellow at INSS, the Institute for National Security Studies in Tel Aviv. And Sima, the reason we wanted to talk to you tonight was obviously Iran is playing a big role here, right? Iran is behind the scenes. Iran is funding and financing, obviously, Hamas, but also Hezbollah in the north. And the feeling that I have, at least, is that Iran, to a large extent, is getting away with some sort of immunity, right? The world is threatening. President Biden is saying don't to the Iranians, but not really doing much when it comes to that. In the practical terms, when America's attacked in Syria, they attack back at Shia militias. And I'm curious how you're viewing the role that Iran is playing here, what its agenda is, and whether it's the right approach so far that the West, and particularly the United States, has taken when it comes to Iranian aggression.
So good morning, good evening, depends where we are. You're right by saying that, first of all, that Iran is focal for everything that is happening here. The fighting was done by Hamas, but everything else was upon Iran. When it starts with, as you said, with financial support, with arms, with training, with technological support, how to construct missiles, everything. And what is the most important one is what Iran has created in the last years, the axis of resistance. The resistance front, or as each one calls it, and the focal issue of this front was that each side is supporting the other. If the Palestinians, and especially the Palestinians, because this was a ongoing conflict that from time to time we saw that it was rising up on Jerusalem, on other issues at the border, and with missiles, sometimes with balloons, sometimes with people reaching the border. So it was a vibrant conflict, and therefore the whole composition of this front was to support the cause of Hamas, and to support it not only by talking or by declarations, but by opening new and further fronts. And this was the core of the understanding that Israel will not be able to fight on a multi fronts war. And this is something that Israelis have also been saying openly, and Iran was saying openly that Israel will not be able to do it, and especially in the last year, that Israel, from the internal situation in Israel that was such a complicated one, not to say more about that, Israel will not be able to sustain such a situation. So in a way, I think this combination of the front of resistance was one of the motivations of Hamas, in brackets, disappointed probably already, that Hamas believed that once they start, they will succeed. And when they succeed, and when they were sure that Israel will retaliate, also on this, they thought differently, of course, and I think they are disappointed, and they, in a way, have even, I think, not only disappointed, but also thinking that Israel has done something that they have not pre-planned before. So all this together puts Iran in the middle of whole events that we see now. Now, the second part of your remark was very correct, that Iran, in a way, distanced itself from the events is talking about Hamas and Hezbollah and the Yemen and the Houthis and others, but Iran itself is not doing anything on the military front, but is doing a lot on the diplomatic front, a lot in a way that I haven't seen before any time.
So but the Iranian agenda, right, is obviously, I think, and you correct me, but they want chaos, they want anarchy, they want Israel weakened. But they also have their own interests beyond just killing us and hurting us, right? They want regional dominance. They want to be a superpower. They want to have a stronger economy. They want to get more money unfrozen from the West. And they also want to be able to continue to pursue their nuclear program, right? Whether it's to slowly crawl towards a nuclear capability or it's to one day break out when the decision is made. So how does this serve their local interests, right? Is it just that the world is now distracted and the world is focused on us and not focused on them? So Khamenei, the supreme leader, can sit and maybe contemplate breaking out to military grade uranium. What is their grand strategy here?
So you mentioned some of that, and I'll put them in a different way, but it's you have mentioned some of them. The strategy, as you said, is to have dominance in the region. And in order to have dominance in the region, the Iranians have done two things parallel. One was to create this resistance front, but the other one was to improve relations with neighboring countries. They improved relations, they renewed relations with the Emirates, and then with the Saudis in the last merge, and they have improved relations with Turkey and with other countries, Tajikistan and other countries on the other side of the front of their border. And from their point of view, part of the dominance, regional dominance, was by having better relations with those countries. On the other hand, weakening Israel as much as possible. I want to remind you that Iran has an open bill with Israel for a long time, for many things that Iran thinks that Israel has done in Iran and in Syria. And so the combination of these two was, and of course, I didn't mention yet, and should be mentioned, very important, the upgrade of relations between Iran and Russia. This is something new for the last 2 years. And there is no question that it has put Iran in a different position than it was before, from the point of view of being equal to Russia in a way. Russia needs them and is buying arms from them, the UAVs, and probably in the future also missiles. So all this together was part of making Iran stronger, more dominant in the region. And I am not mentioning, but just should be mentioned in a word, they're joining the Shanghai conference, they're joining the BRICS. So they have created a kind of a diplomatic activity that have improved their posture in the region and in the international community as well. And they were believing that with what they have done on the other side, with the resistance front, they are also strong militarily, not only diplomatically.
Okay. Avi, if I could turn to you for a moment, everything that Sima just mentioned, BRICS, Shanghai, all of the diplomatic progress that Iran has essentially made. So we're facing, it's kind of like a two-headed monster almost. There's the proxies and there's the weapons and there's the nuclear, but there's also this whole realignment that's taking place in the region. And when we've thought about realignment all these years, it's been, we're beating them because we're getting the Abraham Accords and we're normalizing relations. But when you look really at what's happening, we're now stuck in a war, right, with Hamas and maybe with Hezbollah. And they're progressing diplomatically, yes, with countries that are not the best actors, but they're growing also diplomatically in strength. Avi, you're muted.
All right. So good evening, everybody. And hi, Sima. Welcome to our session. Well, I'm not very much impressed with the renewal of relations that Iran forged with Saudi Arabia and others, because I think that these countries are knowing very well that they have to be quite fearful from Iran. And I think that what we in Israel must consider, especially at this moment, that we have to focus ourselves to concentrate with the Hamas challenge and to see that we beat Hamas in a very strong way, and that will project the right message everywhere in the region, outside the region. We have to, it can change overnight, but until now, Iran is quite restrained from involving herself directly with the fighting. We still do not see Hezbollah wishing to get itself into a full-scale war with Israel. Again, it can be changed, and it can be changed not because somebody has an intention to change it. This is the habit of escalation. But after we've heard all the activities militarily and diplomatically of Iran, it's rather clear that Israel shouldn't position herself as the only fighter against the Iranian threat. We have to carefully devise and be part of a regional and global coalition against this threat. And yes, to see it in global terms, but that, if possible, should be postponed till we defeat Hamas.
So I actually have two questions, kind of similar. I'll do one with Sima, then one with Shmuel. The questions are the following. Dedi Barnea, who's the head of the Mossad, right? I'm guessing you know him from past experiences. Is now it seems preoccupied, to me at least, very focused on, he's been to Qatar, meeting with Bill Burns, the CIA director there, and the Qataris, talking to him about a possible hostage swap, very focused, obviously, on Hamas and everything else. So the Mossad well. Can the Mossad, what's the saying in English? Walk and chew gum at the same time, right? Can it deal with the Qatari thing and deal, obviously, keep that eye that it needs to on Iran? And then to Shmuel, politically speaking, also, we have a massive challenge, right? Netanyahu, as I watch him, and I don't know how many people watched the interview that he did on CNN. I think it was either Monday or Sunday. He does not look good. He looks tired. He's not the Netanyahu that we're used to watching and seeing, who dominates the TV screen. He controls the interviewer, not the other way around. Is he up to the task in being able to juggle all these balls in the air at the same time, like we used to think? So, Sima, why don't you first start with the Mossad, and then Shmuel, you'll give us kind of the more Knesset look of things.
Okay. Before I say something about the Mossad, let me say one thing about, because what I presented before was all the achievements of Iran and the feeling that they have after 2 years, that they have established, before the war, that they have established everything they wanted on the diplomatic and as well as on the resistance front. I, of course, want to say that one of the failures they might see after the war is that all those countries that renewed relations, but renewed not because of love to Iran, but because sometimes you prefer to have your enemy close to you than far from you, that they are more determined now to go and to close relations with the US, with CENTCOM, and with Israel. Because I think this war will at the end, will already now, I can say, has shown everyone who is Iran. So this will be a lesson learned in the region very well. It was known before, but it is much more today than it was before. So back to your question, I think at the end of the day, the Mossad is an operational institution. And what Daddy Barnea is doing, he's doing a kind of a diplomatic activity due to his good relations with the Qataris. And I think the whole other part of the Mossad, without the head of the Mossad, of them are doing the operational activity and the intelligence gathering and everything. And I think they are very focused on issues that you mentioned already. It's not only the regional issues, but also the nuclear one, the ballistic one, and now the terror one, because we already have heard that in Brazil, a group of Hezbollah, when it is Hezbollah and Iran together with the intelligence, IRGC intelligence, together with Hezbollah, we're trying to conduct a terror activity. And I think what we will see, we've heard already in Israel that people were advised to look very well where they are flying to or something like that.
Not to fly anywhere, right?
Yeah, that's right. But what I think is that this is something that the Mossad is very much occupied with. So Daddy Barnea is flying to Qatar, but all the others are running after the Iranians.
So they can chew gum and run after the Iranians at the same time.
No question.
Okay, Shmuel, moving over to the political angle of this, looking at the players that we have right now, especially the prime minister and his function and performance until now, what's your read of how that can play?
Well, I think that the political question in many ways became less interesting in the last few days, as Israelis realized that Prime Minister Netanyahu is probably here to stay. There were people talking at the initial stages of the war about the possibility of him stepping aside or about the possibility of him not being able to lead the war effort. But I think by now it is established that he is going to lead the effort, at least for now. He has the support of the coalition. He has the support of the party that joined the unity government or the interim government, whatever you want to call it. Benny Gantz and his party, they support his leadership for now. You said that he didn't look good on television. I think that depends on your view of the situation. Netanyahu is not the man he used to be. He's not as dominating and he's not seen as charismatic as he used to be. This comes with age, with trouble, with all kinds of other things that might trouble him. In fact, I think that the last week, especially the press conference he did for Israelis 2-3 days ago, was much better than previous such occurrences. So it somewhat improved compared to previous situations. Then again, we must say, in his interviews on American television, Netanyahu complained and compared himself to President Roosevelt after Pearl Harbor and George W. Bush after 9/11. And Mr. Netanyahu said, well, no one was asking them to step down after these surprise attacks. I think the question we can put forward a question back to him. In the case of both Roosevelt and Bush, we saw public support rising after these surprise attacks. Their approval rating went up to 70, 80, in the case of Bush to 90%.
Over 90%, yeah.
Yeah, this did not happen in the case of Netanyahu. So he might be justified in complaining that no one was asking them to step down. Then again, we can ask him, how come the approval rating for this president went up dramatically after the attacks, and it did not happen in his case? This is something that he might want to contemplate. Why Israelis did not rally around the flag after the surprise attack. They did rally around the flag in the sense of support for the IDF, support for the war, support for the effort.
But not for him.
But not for him. Not for him. And that's something that raises many questions. Then again, he's the leader of the war effort, and I think that for now, questions, asking daily questions about his appearances on TV will not be fruitful for us as Israelis. We should take into account the fact that he's there, he's leading the effort, and unless one day he comes forward like Prime Minister Begin at his time saying, I can no longer do this,
right.
We should put aside the doubts and let him lead the effort.
Let me just say, I saw both Avi and Sima wanted to respond, but let me just say one thing. The Bush approval ratings, which started 2 weeks after 9/11, were at 90%. I looked them up the other day, and then they slowly, over the next, by the end of his terms, his 2 terms, he was in the low 20s, right? It took about a year or two for them to drop.
30s. He went as down as 25 in the Gallup polls, and then back to, I think, 33, 34 when his term ended.
But when you're so high, you only have one direction to go, which is down. When you start off low, as Bibi is, maybe the opposite also works. So you only have one direction to go, which could be up. So, that's why I'm of the opinion it's hard to write him off. Avi, you wanted to say something, and then we'll go to Sima.
Just shortly, I think that if I would sum up what Shmuel said in my way, is that Israel is highly united despite its prime minister. And this is something that I think that historians will study many years to come, because it's quite a unique phenomenon in time of war. Now, with regard to the term of Netanyahu, I think that the test, or at least the first test, will be when the intensity of the war in Gaza will be a bit relaxed, and 10 of thousands reservists will be released, and their way of projecting and expressing their dissatisfaction with Israeli government leadership and prime minister, that would be a point of test for the leadership of Netanyahu and his rule in Israel.
Sima, you had something to say?
Yeah, I completely agree with Avi. I want to add to that there is no comparison that he has done with Pearl Harbor and 9/11, because Bibi Netanyahu is part of the conceptual failure of the strategy vis-a-vis Gaza. It's not Bush was not part of the conceptual strategy vis-a-vis Al-Qaeda. So what comparison? It's a terror activity, and that's a terror activity. But Bibi Netanyahu was the one who came in 2009 until today, so many years, talking about separation between the West Bank and Gaza, talking about encouraging better Hamas and trying to decrease the capabilities of Abu Mazen in his country. So he is part of the system. He's not the only part. He's not the only one to be blamed. No question about that. And we know that others have already taken responsibility. Sorry, but he is part of the problem. No question of that, and it will be very difficult. He will come with Pearl Harbor and with other stories. It's not relevant to the Israelis, and it's not relevant to the story in Israel. And he's the one who, for the last 10 months or 11 months, has been conducting this reform, what he was trying to do. And he has made everything, he supported all his things. The only thing that Israel was doing in the last 10 months was to think who will be the supreme president, exactly. And now we see that the government is not functioning when it has to function with all the people that are out of their houses, etc. I'll take a glass of water. Sorry.
Shmuel, one of the things that Netanyahu has had a difficulty with over time has been decision making also sometimes, right? With being, using force along those lines. We saw, for example, if we go back to Iran, there were at least two previous instances, one in 2011, one in 2012, where he considered military action, in the end walked away from it. Now he is using military action power and the IDF in a big way. And maybe this is his salvation to an extent, also politically, right? If the IDF does a good job, you could take the credit for it.
Well, there are a lot of ironies associated with Prime Minister Netanyahu. So, for example, many people outside of Israel see Netanyahu as a leader that's been too aggressive towards the Palestinians, or generally speaking, on matters of war and peace. But Netanyahu was, in fact, a fairly cautious leader when it comes to conducting the affairs of war. He's not nearly as aggressive as people assume. Prime Minister Olmert, at his time in 2006, when he launched the Second Lebanon War, did something that Netanyahu would probably never do. He's much more cautious than most other prime minister. On the other hand, Netanyahu is trying to project this image of a strong and decisive leader, while many people understand that Netanyahu tends to hesitate and wait a long time, sometimes until the last minute, and sometimes people might say until after the last minute before he makes a decision. Now, for him, this is probably both a personal tendency and also a tactic. Netanyahu does not believe in boxing himself in before he has to do it. This is true on political matters. He doesn't want to make decisions that will put him on a track that might not be the most favorable to him. I think this is also true when it comes to the conduct of diplomatic affairs or the affairs of security. Now, of course, you're right. You said earlier, Netanyahu started the war with a very meager approval rating. His approval rating is around 30%. 75% of Israelis currently say that after the war, Netanyahu will have to walk away, will have to resign or get fired by someone. They do not want to see him remain as prime minister after the war. This is true today. Will it still be true if Israel achieves great victory, all the hostages return safely home, Gaza is clean and disarmed, Hamas is no longer the ruler of Gaza? If everything ends up, and Hezbollah is defeated in the north, if Israel ends this war with great victory, which I hope for, yes, then Netanyahu might be one of the beneficiaries. Will it be enough for people to say, well, after all, he wasn't as bad as we thought he is, or after all, he did achieve what we wanted him to achieve, and hence he can stay and we still want him as our leader? That's a question we cannot answer now. But clearly the mood in Israel now is that even, Israel, currently when we ask Israelis, do you believe Israel is going to win the war? They say yes with high confidence. At the same poll, they also say, we want Netanyahu to leave office after the war. So right now they don't see a contradiction between winning the war and Netanyahu having to go. This could change, but right now that's the situation we're dealing with.
I want just two more questions on two different topics, and because our time is running out. Avi, I wanted to ask you about President Erdogan in Turkey. What in the last year, we seem to have had a rapprochement with him to an extent, right? Yes, he was this anti-Semite. Yes, he was anti-Israel. Things got a little better. He obviously, maybe you'll just tell me, well, Yaakov, what do you think? He wanted our gas, and that's what it was about. And now he went back to being who he always has been. But is Turkey just gone? Is that it? Do we need to come to terms with the fact that Turkey is no longer a friend?
Well, strategically, I would suggest to differentiate between the long run, between the strategic value of Turkey from global point of view and Israeli point of view, and Erdogan. Erdogan, will not be with us in 10, 20 years, or maybe less than that. So I don't think that Israel always should keep in mind the strategic importance of Turkey and not burn every line of contact with this important country. And with regard to Erdogan, we know him. We know him for many years. And even when there was a sort of, improved relations and phone calls and this and that and visits, those who were careful regarding the future conduct of Erdogan warned that we shouldn't go to any gas deal with Turkey because this guy cannot be trusted.
By the way, Avi, you'll appreciate this. I don't know if you were there, but when President Peres made his first visit overseas as president, it was to Turkey.
It was my recommendation to him.
I joined him as a reporter.
I was there as well.
Covered the visit, and we had this night where he invited journalists. He was staying in the presidential compound. We were staying in a hotel just outside in Ankara. He'd invited journalists inside. Peres was already in his 80s, right, sitting there for hours and just told us, sipping white wine the whole time and just telling us story, regaling us with story after story after story. It was a moment that you can't forget. Sima, to wrap us up, here's my question. Is it possible that if the conflict spreads in scope with Hezbollah, let's say, Khamenei makes a decision, now is the time for me to break out, enrich uranium to military grade levels, and announce to the world I now have nuclear power? Is it that they'll use the cover? Is that something else that we have to be concerned about?
It's a very good question. I cannot say that I have a very good answer, but I will say that I've been thinking about it, of course. First of all, is that for the time being, it seems that Khamenei doesn't want Hezbollah to be part of the war. He is keeping Hezbollah as the diamond in the crown that he wants to for the future. And I think this is things might change, but speaking now, that currently it looks like that. So that's one thing. The other one is that Iran doesn't want to be involved in any way. And the third thing is that the US doesn't want in any way a global regional war. So all these three components, I think, might bring us to the end of the war with Hamas without having a multi-dimension war. That's one thing. The other one relates directly to your question on the nuclear issue. I think Iran is, as we all know, very close to the possibility to make a political decision to go the extra mile for nuclear device. I think they have good reasons not to do it. And it is not because of Israel, it's because of a lot of other reasons. And because they are always very cautious on their way on the nuclear issue, they don't want to be part. And I think the question will be very relevant. I can tell you from the way I see it, could be very relevant after the war. Now, during the war, if they do something like that, using the fact that everybody is concentrating on the Middle East and then doesn't pay attention too much to them, even though in the coming days we will have a report of the IAEA and see how much they have done in the last 3 months. I think they understand that if they are doing something like that, especially breakout, they will be under a military, they might be under a military attack. And this is something which this regime doesn't want in any way. So I think it is a relevant question to the day after. I don't think it's going to happen in the near future.
There's a lot of moving pieces in this Middle East, and it's going to stay with us for a while. And I mean, just on the point that you made, there's a part of me that wants to recommend to President Biden, you have all your assets here. You got the Ford Carrier Group, the Eisenhower, you got the Florida submarine. You can change the history of the world in one simple decision, right? And by the way, he might not even have to use military force. He could say to the Iranians, you have 24 hours to stop Hezbollah. You have 24 hours to stop Hamas. You have 24 hours to dismantle. Otherwise, we do it for you. Now, obviously, he's not going to do that. American presidents don't do things like that. But there's a part of me that can have wishful thinking. Anyhow, I want to thank Sima Shine from INSS, former head of research and intelligence at the Mossad, to my two colleagues from JPPI, Avi Gil and Shmuel Rosner, and to all our viewers and listeners, thank you very much for joining us again. We'll be back here tomorrow. Thank you very much.